Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Business Incorporated. I am BC Adebayo. Coming up on today's program, world food prices fall sharply in April due to economic and logistical impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. South Africa's business confidence sinks to 35-year low in April on COVID-19 impact. And Kenya, Uganda gets $1.23 billion in IMF emergency funds. But let's begin with intraday numbers coming from the major African markets which are largely in red, with the Nigerian all-share index down 0.17% at about midday. The JSE index appears to be sustaining Wednesday's positive tempo with a 0.20% increase at intraday. The EGX 30 was 1.16% lower at intraday, while the Kenyan Bourse closed 1.74% positive on Wednesday. And in the Middle East, most of the markets were looking good at intraday. In Abu Dhabi, the index was up 1%, while the Dubai FM was 0.19% higher. The Qatari index was also 0.46% positive at intraday. The market in Saudi was the only one in the red, with a 0.40% decline at intraday. Let's cross over now to the UK, where our London correspondent Juliana Olayinka is standing by to give us updates on today's market activities and headlines. Good afternoon, Juliana. It's good to see you. Tell us, what are the intraday numbers saying? Are there any reactions to the Bank of England's moves?
Good afternoon, Bissy. Well, there was a reaction to the Bank of England's announcements early this morning, but it was a positive reaction. Yes, we did get a grim reading from Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey. He did project that in Q2, our GDP could fall as much as 30%, more likely 15%. But even that 15% quarter-on-quarter fall would be the deepest recession Britain has experienced in 300 years. The good thing about what he was saying is that he does predict that this time next year, the economy will be able to bounce back pretty quickly, unlike it did during the 2009 financial crisis. And that's because of the government's bailout schemes. They really held the furlough scheme, where the government is subsidising employers to pay 80% of people's wages. They think that's a good thing, and that's going to get people back into the workplace pretty soon. Quantitative easing stayed the same at £200 billion, and they didn't cut interest rates any lower than the historic low of 0.1%. Now, the FTSE All-Share at intraday is still up by 0.79%. The FTSE 100 is up by 0.71%, and the FTSE 250 is up by 1.31%. In the currencies market, the pound is up on the dollar by 0.25%, up on the euro by 0.30%, and up on the Japanese yen by 0.66%. It's worth saying that travel stocks are pulling the FTSE a little bit lower. IAG, their shares are down 4.3%, and also BT Group, they're down by a whopping 9.1% after they announced early this morning that they would be cutting their dividend, not only for this year, but also next year too. Shareholders weren't happy with that.
Well, still talking about IAG, Juliana, now the British Airways owner says it's planning for a meaningful return of flights in July at the earliest if lockdown measures are relaxed. How relieving is this news for Londoners?
Wow, it depends on which Londoners you speak to, Bissy. I was speaking to Chimeze about this morning, and there's 50% of the population in Britain that have a little bit of coronaphobia at the moment and don't want lockdown to be lifted and are pretty comfortable working from home. No surprises to hear that. But, you know, this is good news, although IAG have said that it's very uncertain. I believe they've said that because, of course, they've put out some of their trade reports this year that shows that they're down about 135 million euros. And this time last year, they were up in the hundreds of millions in terms of profit making. So I think they wanted to kind of ease the anxiety of their shareholders by saying they could potentially get up back in the air by July, which everybody knows is the peak of the summer, the busiest time for the aviation industry. Of course, there are going to be strict measures in place. They're going to have to make sure that they're able to, if they can, have social distancing, because until there's a vaccine, that's exactly what people will need to do. And they also want to ensure the safety of their staff. Now, unfortunately, for those who are working with British Airways, because IAG also own Iberia and Aer Lingus, this doesn't mean that those 12,000 job losses, which they announced last week, won't still come into play. They're still in talks with union bosses and how they're going to be dishing out these voluntary redundancies. But yeah, this is great news, and you definitely have a sense, particularly in the global north, that they want people to start going out again. They're starting to show images of within airports and showing people booking flights. But the height of the summer, let's see if those passenger numbers will return.
We'll wait to see. In other news now, Next has snapped up space in 5 former Debenhams stores to extend its online beauty concept to bricks and mortar. What is Next up to?
Well, Next is, trying to stamp out the competition as it has done for the past couple of years. They've been performing exceptionally well. The retail high street in Britain has really suffered over the past couple of years, and Next has been one of the very few retailers that have been able to buck that trend. Even though they closed much of their warehouse in the beginning of the lockdown, they've been up and running, and they seem to be up and running at a larger scale. Debenhams, on the other hand, which is a really historic, very popular department store here in Britain, they haven't been doing so well. There have been so many discussions about whether or not they will or will not be going into administration. We're not sure whether that's going to happen, but what we are certain of is that they will be closing some stores or some sections of stores for good. Hammerson, and that's a big landlord in retail space, and 5 Debenhams stores, beauty stores, that are within a Hammerson site won't be opening when lockdown is lifted. And Next has snapped that up. As you said, they are now going to be having their own Next Beauty Hall, I believe. Let me get this name right. The Beauty Hall from Next. So in a couple of months' time, that's possibly where a lot of us will be shopping to get our makeup and our premium perfume. And they've been doing this in the market for a couple of years now. They've got several of the big beauty brands available on their online stores, and they want to expand that into retail departments. And it's pretty interesting that they're not doing it within their own stores, because Next have quite a large store. They're going to be doing it in other department stores. So they really want to stamp their brand on the dwindling high street. They also said that they're going to be offering a service that we haven't seen before. So who knows what that's going to look like. But this is good news for Next, at least.
Fingers crossed, Juliana. Many thanks, and we'll see you again later.